Welcome to the Courtauld collection in detail. I am Scott Nethersole and I'm a senior lecturer in Italian Renaissance art at the Courtauld. The detail that I'm focusing on today shows Tobias and the Archangel Raphael from the Trinity altarpiece by Sandro Botticelli and his workshop. We see them in the lower left of the altarpiece. There they walk hand in hand, staring at one another, Raphael's robes billowing behind him. He carries, let's say Raphael, a small box of some sort, while his companion Tobias has a fish dangling from his hand. Rays radiate from Tobias's head, unlike the full halo that surrounds Raphael's. Now their story is told in the book of Tobit. The archangel, posing as a human, accompanies the boy Tobias on a journey to Medea, where he has been sent to collect a debt for his father, Tobit, who is blind. En route, Raphael has Tobias gut a fish and collect its liver, its heart, and its gall, which on his return he rubs onto his father's eyes and cures his blindness. As such, Tobias and the angel are associated with healing and with pilgrimage as a consequence of their travels. They are not uncommon in Florentine painting, and here you can see another example by Filippino Lippi, painted at around the same time as the Courtauld painting, that's now in the National Gallery in Washington. Let us return to the Courtauld painting. If we zoom out to see the entire panel, we can appreciate the relationship of Tobias and the angel to the other figures in the composition. Now, at first glance, it is unsettling, especially these abrupt shifts in scale and in space. In the center, we see the Trinity surrounded by angels, displayed in a particular configuration known as the Throne of Mercy. God the Father, with a long grey beard, supports the cross on which his Son, Christ, is crucified. Between them flies the dove of the Holy Spirit. Botticelli has evidently had some difficulty in positioning the dove in the space between Christ's head and the wood of the cross, and as a consequence the one wing is only just suggested behind Christ's halo. Flanking the Throne of Mercy are two saints, St. Mary Magdalene on the left, who looks up at the Trinity, her hands raised in prayer, and John the Baptist on the right. He looks out towards us, catching our eye and then directing it through his gesture to the Trinity. These two saints appear in a barren landscape reminiscent of the desert into which they retired to do penance. Despite the difference in space, they are scaled in relation to God the Father, such that Christ looks a lot smaller. Now, these two saints also tell us something about the commission. John the Baptist is the patron saint of Florence, the city in which the altarpiece was painted and originally positioned. Mary Magdalene was understood as a sinner, and most often as a prostitute, who had repented of her old ways to follow Christ. We know that Botticelli painted an altarpiece for a high altar of the Florentine nunnery of Sant Elisabetta delle Convertite, St. Elizabeth of the Converts, which was a house of Augustinian women, many of whom had once been prostitutes, and had subsequently taken up the veil. It seems likely, therefore, that the Courtauld altarpiece is this altarpiece, which makes it a highly significant social document and an extremely rare record of a marginalized group and their visual culture. Mary Magdalene is there as an exemplary figure. As the nuns had followed her example in life, they had turned to her example in contemplating the Trinity. And this brings me back to my detail, the two figures in the foreground. They are on a radically different scale, which gives the viewer pause. Clearly, their role is not the same as the other figures. They might be painted in the same desert as the two saints, yet they cannot occupy the same space conceptually. At this point, of course, the obvious question is, well, why are they so small? And unfortunately, there isn't an obvious answer to this question. I think it has something to do with the patronage of the altarpiece, but I cannot be sure, not least because there are still a lot of unanswered questions about the commission, who paid for it and when. At this moment, our research is still ongoing. But what we can say is that, believe it or not, they were originally even smaller. We have examined the painting using infrared reflectography. Now, this technology is most often used by art historians, scientists and conservators to detect underdrawing, although it can in fact show us a lot more. It allows us to see, in part, below the paint surface, depending on whether infrared light is absorbed or reflected by certain materials. Now, if we move to the right and slightly upwards from where Tobias and the angel are currently, into a portion of sky between John the Baptist and the feet of Christ, we see that Tobias and the angel were previously drawn in a different position. We now know too that they were not just drawn there, but fully painted there. As now they walk towards the left, although Raphael was originally on the left-hand side, such that Tobias's glance at him means that he has to look away from the viewer. Behind them we can see a small arched bridge over a stream, presumably the stream that is the source of the fish that Tobias will collect. Behind them we can also see a building and the original line of the landscape. It would seem that someone, most likely the patron or the nuns in my opinion, but it might equally have been the painter, was worried that these two figures were too small and needed to be larger. The infrared reflectogram tells us that they were evidently important enough to warrant painting over and starting again. But we learn more than just this. The style of the figures is similar to a series of drawings of male figures posed in the workshop that at various times have been attributed to Botticelli or individuals in his workshop, especially the young Filippino Lippi. Now here is one of these sheets. It's now in the Christ Church Picture Gallery in Oxford, and it is almost certainly by Filippino Lippi. I hope you'll agree with me that the facial type of the figures in the middle are similar to that of the first versions of the Archangel Raphael. It's not just the rounded, wide face with curly hair, it's also the shorthand used by this artist to abbreviate the features of the face, the eyes, the nostrils, the mouths. If I'm right, then Filippino could have also worked on this panel. He was, after all, in Botticelli's workshop in the 1470s. A few moments ago, I showed you another painting of Tobias and the Angel, now in Washington, that is certainly by Filippino. Have a look at it again, and compare it with the infrared reflectogram. They're extremely close, aren't they? The more I look at the visual evidence, the more I'm convinced that Filippino was directly involved on this panel, working for or alongside Botticelli, who it seems then overpainted his work and repainted the two figures in the position that we now see them. The involvement of Filippino has a whole series of other implications, especially to the dating of the altarpiece and the length of time that it took to complete. But this is a story for another day. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will join us for the next episode of In Detail.